Welcome. We have learned to factor simple quadratics with a leading coefficient of 1. And now we want to be able to solve the quadratic when it's set equal to 0. And we're going to go into quadratics that do not have a leading coefficient of 1, which we'll have to factor by a method called factor by grouping. But let's refresh or review doing this factor a simple quadratic. Again, what we want to do is we're going to write that as simply two sets of parentheses that have a leading coefficient of x in each of them, because that first x times this x will give us this x squared when we FOIL it back together. Now, the two numbers that we need to put here, so we either add or subtract a number and we add or subtract a number, those two numbers need to multiply to give me negative 36, but add to give me negative 5. So what I do is I go off to the side and I put my negative 36 and I start writing all the factors. 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. Now, the next thing I ask myself is, the sum has to be a negative 5. So multiplying these two together always gets me the 36, but I need to make one of them negative. So it's a negative 36, and I'm going to make the larger one negative because when I add them, I want to get a negative 5. So 1 times negative 36 is negative 36, but 1 plus negative 36 is not negative 5. That's not what I want. 2 times negative 18 is negative 36, but 2 plus negative 18 is not negative 5, isn't. So then 3 times negative 12 is negative 36, but 3 plus a negative 12, again, is not negative 5. 4 times negative 9 is negative 36, and 4 plus negative 9 is negative 5. So this is the one we want. So what I'm going to do is come over here and put my positive 4, which is going to be a plus 4, and I'm going to put my minus 9, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. Now when we're solving, either this first factor, this first set of parentheses must equal to 0, or the second set of parentheses must equal 0. So I can take the x plus 4, set it equal to 0, solve that for x, and I get a solution of negative 4. Or I can take that second factor, the x minus 9, set that equal to 0, solve for x, and I get an x value of 9. So my two solutions for this quadratic are negative 4 and positive 9. Now, that's fairly simple to do when that leading coefficient, or the x squared term, just has a 1 in front of it. Wonder if it doesn't. Wonder if it doesn't have a 1 in front of it. What do we do? Now, I would like to be able to factor the 4 away. If I could factor the 4 away, I would. But 4 doesn't go into this negative 5. So the way we're going to factor this is we're going to do a method that's similar to what we've done, except I'm not using negative 5 as my product. Right? Remember up here, in this one, I used negative 36 as my product of two numbers, and then I found two numbers that added to the middle term. Well, in this one, I can't do that. The reason I can't do that is I have this 4 in front as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply that first term of 4 times the third term of negative 5. That gives me a negative 20. Now I'm going to find factors of that add up to a positive 8. So again, I'm going to write 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and I don't think there's any other factors. Now, again, I want my sum to be positive, but my product to be negative, so I'm going to make the smaller one negative, and now I'm going to go through my process. Negative 1 times 20 is negative 20, but negative 1 plus 20 is not positive 8. That didn't work. Negative 2 times 10 is negative 20, but negative 2 times 10, or negative 2 plus 10 is my 8. That's the one I want. Now, I got to do it a little differently than I did up here. Up here, I just wrote the two parentheses and put in those two factors I got, that 4 and negative 9. Down here, I can't do that. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to split this 8 into these two factors. So what I do is I write the 4x squared. I'm not doing anything to that first term. But the 8x, I'm going to break into a minus 2x, and then a plus 10x, and then I write my third term, which is now a fourth term, by the way, equals 0. So I hope you realize all I've done is I broke this 8x into two terms that when I add together would give me 8x. but I'm not going to add them together. Now I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to look at just the first two terms. I'm going to ignore those second terms for just a minute. I'm going to ask myself, what is in common with the 4x squared minus 2x? Well, it has a factor of 2 and also a factor of x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out a 2 and an x from this first term. So 4 divided by 2 is going to leave a 2. X squared divided by x will leave 1x. Then I have a minus. Then 2x divided by 2x, because I'm dividing it out, is a 1. We're always left with at least a 1. Okay, now I'm going to do the same process with the second two. I'm going to ignore the first two for a minute. I'm going to look at the 10x minus 5, those second two terms, or the third and fourth term, I guess. And I'm going to say, what's in common with those two terms? Well, a 5 is in common. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out a positive 5, put parentheses, and I'm going to say, well, what's 10x divided by 5? It's 2x. What's 5 divided by 5? It's minus 1. And then I have my equals 0. Now, if you've done the process correctly, you should look at this 2x minus 1 in parentheses and this 2x minus 1 in parentheses, and they should be the same. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor that away from the 2x and the 5. Now this is the part that's very confusing for students. So what I want you to think of, this as a single term, because it's a product of two things, added to this single term. What I'm going to do is I'm going to factor away the parentheses. I'm going to pull this parentheses and this parentheses out in front as a single parentheses. So I divided away from this 2x. So I'm going to do a parentheses and write what's left of this term. What's left is the 2x. Now I pulled out the 2x minus 1 from this term, which leaves the plus 5. And then I have equals 0. So think of it as I pulled that out and I pulled that out in front, leaving the 2x and the 5. For some reason, it's confusing for students. They wonder why there isn't two parentheses with the 2x minus 1. It now became 1. But now I have that equal to 0. I just set each factor to 0, right? So either that first factor of 2x minus 1 must be the 0 in order to get a product of 0. Solve that for x. 2x equals positive 1 because I added 1 over. 2 equals 1/2. So my first solution is 1/2. Now I set that second factor, 2x plus 5 equal to 0. Minus 5 from both sides. I get 2x equals negative 5. And then divide by 2. And I get x is equal to negative 5/2 is my second solution. Okay, I'm going to do one more of those so you can see that process one more time. So let's do a 15x squared minus 16x plus 4 equals 0. Now again, since this leading coefficient is not 1, I first see, could I factor out 15 from all three terms, which obviously I can't. 15 doesn't go into 6 or 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leading 15 and I'm going to times it by that last term of 4. So 15 times 4 is 60. Now I'm going to find two numbers that multiply to give me 60 that add to give me a negative 16. So again, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10, 8, 9. So there we go. Now, notice that the product needs to be positive. Positive 15 times positive 4 is a positive 60. But the sum needs to be negative. That means they're all negative. Every factor is negative because a negative times a negative is positive, and a negative plus a negative will give me my negative sum. Those two do not add up to negative 16, because remember, we're trying to get negative 16. Those two do not add up to negative 16. Those don't add up to negative 16. Those don't add up to negative 16. Those don't add up to negative 6. It's the very last one. A negative 10 and a negative 6 add up to negative 16, but multiply to give me a positive 60. Now remember, I don't do my parentheses yet. What I do is I actually separate this 16 into these two terms. And it doesn't matter which one you do first. If you need, I could do the negative 10x first, then the negative 6x, but I chose to do the negative 6x and then the negative 10x plus 4 equals 0. So I broke this middle term into these two terms. Now I'm going to look at just the first two terms, and I say, what's in common with a 15 and an x squared and a 6 and an x? Well, they both have a factor of 3, and they both have a factor of x. So what's left of the 15 and the x squared when I factor out a 3 and an x? Well, I'm left with a 5x. What's left of the 6x when I factor out a 3x or divide by 3x? We're just left with a 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2, x divided by x is 1. Right? Now I'm going to look at the second two terms, say what's in common with these two terms? Well, what's in common is a 2. 10's even, 4's even. Now be careful here. This will take some practice, but if you'll notice, remember, when I factor out, I want it to be left like this. And this is a -2, where this is plus, but this is a negative. So I'm actually going to factor out not just a 2, but a -2, because I want to change the sign. I want that to become a positive 5x, because what's negative 10x divided by negative 2? Positive 5x. And then I want this 4 to become a negative 2. And what's positive 4 divided by negative 2? It's -2. So I didn't factor out just a positive 2, I factored out a negative 2. So these parentheses now, if you'll notice, look exactly the same. 5x minus 2, 5x minus 2. So now again, think of this as one term, think of this as another term, and I'm going to factor out the 5x minus 2 from this first term. So I factored that away, leaving, in parentheses, the 3x. Now the second term, again, I factored out the 5x minus 2, leaving the minus 2. Now that's, remember, equal to 0. Now I have my two factors. Now I can actually solve. Remember, this is a product that equals 0, so I either set the first, whoops, that's a minus, the first factor, which is 5x minus 2 equal to 0, and solve. So I get a 5x equals positive 2 when I add the 2 over, and then x equals 2/5. So there's my first solution. My next solution, I'm going to set this factor equal to 0. 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. Add the 2 over, I get 3x equals 2. Divide by 3, I get my other solution of 2/3. So I have one solution of 2/3 and one solution of 2/5. If you have any questions on how to do this, I will more than happily do it again in class for you if you need.